A man I know, Ned Marcosian, teaches a doctrine called presentism. In presentism, the past and the future don't exist. Aristotle is dead, therefore there was no Aristotle. We meet to talk about this over coffee, maybe the ultimate non-presentist drink. He has applied for and gotten tenure, and writes and publishes, hurling himself into that unreality, the future. I've been thinking about presentism lately and consciousness and language. Linguist Derek Bickerton wrote, "Only language could have broken through the prison of immediate experience in which every other creature is locked, releasing us into infinite freedoms of space and time." To theorists like Bickerton, language is the tearing apart of temporality. To others, like Jaron Lanier, consciousness, kissing kin to language, traps us in time, in the very concept of a present moment. Wondering about all this, I fly to speak with an orangutan named Chantek. He lives in a habitat on the grounds of Zoo Atlanta in Georgia, where he was placed after a stint at Yerkes Primate Center, and before that, life in the home of his cross-foster mother, as anthropologist Lynn Miles calls herself. She raised him as a signing infant from the age of 9 months, rearing him as much as possible as a human child. Lynn toilet-trained Chantek and gave him chores like cleaning his room, and an allowance. His favorite thing to spend it on is fast food from McDonald's, and his weight threatens to be a lifelong problem. He has ballooned to twice the weight of a normal male orangutan. If he's granted legal rights, as Lynn would like him to be, he could join a fast food class action lawsuit and become not just the most verbal but the richest orang in the world. But in the interests of Chantek's heart, no McDonald's for now. When our van pulls up to Chantek's habitat, he swings out onto one of its inside branches and asks for bottled water, which he calls car water, since Lynn usually has some in her car. He's particular about bottled waters, preferring Naya. Chantek appears as harmlessly shaggy as a Sesame Street figure, the color of a November pumpkin, the size of an enormous easy chair. Because of his strength, though, we're not allowed into his habitat, so he kisses and strokes Lynn through the bars. I know very little sign, so Lynn asks Chantek to teach me some. Chantek has an active vocabulary of about 300 words and a passive vocabulary of 1,000 or more, which he can comprehend either by speech or by sign. We start with the basics. "Teach her apple," says Lynn. Chantek shows me apple, brushing his cheek. I mimic him, and "good," he signs, then asks Lynn what's wrong with her hand, which has a scratch on the knuckle. "I did it cleaning," she tells him, and he makes a grimace of sympathy, then asks to touch and kiss it. Lynn introduces me as Ryder, which becomes my sign name, the friend of Dawn you made a necklace for. Chantek has had surgery recently on his laryngeal flap, the long black fold under the chin that makes orangs look like some kind of colonial barrister. She asks him how he's feeling, if the suture's healing okay. "Yes," says Chantek, "he's fine." He has missed Lynn and wants to play ball. Oh, and there's poop on the other side of the habitat, presumably left there by his companion Cebu. It's dirty and he'd like it removed. Lynn and Chantek speak head to head. Her disorderly reddish hair makes them look for a second like mother and son. A repetitious mother, a leaning son anxious not to misunderstand. I stand there like anyone hanging around two family members who chat familiarly, neither of whom you know very well. You try to find ways to interject yourself into the conversation. Mine turns out to be no more mysterious than a bag of yellow raisins, which Chantek loves and my 5-year-old son Jin, who flew here with me, got tired of. In other words, with one part of my mind, I'm aware of the fact that I'm doing this slightly unreal thing, talking with an orangutan. With another, I'm just a socially awkward person in a group, hoping I don't say anything stupid, and that I can perhaps say or do something a little memorable. "Sad," Chantek says when we, or more precisely, Lynn, leaves. Chantek uses words plus gestures to speak. He might tell Lynn, "I, you talk," indicating the other side of the cage when he wants privacy from me, from my keen and almost predatory listening, as he does several times when I'm there. He insists on privacy to discuss the poop situation. His inability or unwillingness to use complicated syntax puts him at a child's linguistic level, as do other behaviors. In some ways, his resemblance to Jin and every other human child in the world cracks me up. When we give him an apple and ask him to share it with his habitat mate Cebu, he carefully pulls off a crumb of apple flesh and hands it to her, the way Jin will share a bit of a cookie. Really share, you can't have any more, Lynn scolds orally, and he resignedly breaks off half. He signs over and over, begs for ice cream and cheeseburgers. Other things I see show a sophistication a child wouldn't have. Chantek as always dabs his mouth clean after eating, but surprises both Lynn and me by folding the napkin to a fresh side and sponging out the sutured part of his laryngeal flap, which tends to catch food crumbs. He has never cleaned this area in the past and seems to realize the suture needs special attention. Cebu, an orang who has never had human acculturation, grabs the napkin and begins wiping her own mouth as she watches his slow and deliberate swipes. It's not quite the apes throwing bones in the air in front of a monolith from the film 2001, but Cebu has clearly at that moment absorbed a piece of culture. A project called ApeNet is working to put video feeds into Chantek's cage to enable him to talk to Coco, a gorilla in California who also signs. An interspecies chat undertaken in terms of human language but not directed by humans. We want to find out what challenges them, what gives their life meaning, says Lynn. It occurs to me that we have no protocol that answers these questions about ourselves. Maybe we are like the proverbial screwballs who go into the field of psychiatry, posing the questions we would like to force ourselves to answer. Whatever meaning we find in the world must be crammed into a mighty short space. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the longest life and the shortest amount to the same thing. For the passing minute is every man's equal possession, but what has gone by once is not ours. When the longest and the shortest lived of us come to die, the loss is precisely equal. For the sole thing of which any man can be deprived is the present. Consciousness, in the form of self-awareness or inner narration, is our prison to Lanier and our freedom to Bickerton. Most would agree it's a small world. As consciousness studies have grown over the past decade, as we think about our thoughts, we realize how much thought itself is an inconsequential thing. Our present lasts about 2 to 15 seconds, according to Merlin Donald, author of the book A Mind So Rare. Our mind's a blip, elegantly born in the litter of a body that's mostly 4 billion-year-old water. We're the ultimate May-December marriage. The term personhood gets used a lot in the field of animal intelligence. The website Lynn set up proclaims Chantek the world's first orangutan person and ambassador for the rainforest, over a headshot of him, looking solemn and ambassadorial. Personhood means conscious awareness, language, acculturation, socialization, to such a degree that rights would have to be conferred under the law. How, I wonder, might animals see us who fast-forward them or subvert them with our system of mental coding? As those mythical small gods like Hermes or Prometheus who always annoy the hell out of the great gods? Or as a defect given to them, an interspecies virus maybe? A disease that's in my blood, as Lear said, that I must needs call mine. We construct for them the world of what autistic Temple Grandin calls neurotypicals, those who think in normal ways, and neuroatypicals, those who, like her, think differently. Then we test them, calling their intelligence 4-year-old, 5-year-old. I can imagine ape-raised humans, tested in the intelligences that keep orangs going in their world, like the ability to read body stance and facial expression. Asked to judge, for instance, an array of smiles or display the visual and tracking skills to find lychees and mandarins tucked into the dense jungles of Indonesia. We would seem childlike, very dim. Lynn wants Chantek to have freedom. He grew up in her trailer on the campus at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and escaped from his living quarters to look for food. When Chantek was 8, the university shipped him back to Yerkes, his birth facility, which allowed Lynn limited visits for a few years, then declined her the right to see Chantek altogether. They said they wanted to put the animal back into him, she tells me. Lynn says this with some bitterness, and while I mean to come back to the comment later, I forget. A sign of my information gathering and effectiveness. Looking at my notebooks, I wonder what the comment means. Yerkes pioneered primate language. Would an ape troubled by his own shit be too much? Lynn finally regained control of Chantek and had him placed at the zoo, moving to Atlanta to stay close. Chantek is not part of any zoo exhibit. He lives a short ride from the main zoo grounds. And while he has a roomy habitat with plenty of branches for swinging as well as a hammock and private space, it's still a cage. Consciousness, most theorists say, is language. It's what lets you know yourself, know time, become self-aware. If you're a linearist, you can argue that we have given Chantek and the gift of language a more terrible prison than the steel one, the jail of the present with its fine-honed edge. Now Lynn is here, Chantek hears in his head. Now she leaves. Or you could argue with Bickerton that the doors of Chantek's cage have been flung open in a way no key could ever do. I read that Coco the gorilla calls death, in an extraordinary string of thought, comfortable whole bye-bye. Before coming here, I imagined myself having talks like that with Chantek, finding out what the whole is, what the comfort. But he teaches me a few words and, satisfied by my basic sufficiency, turns to Lynn, occasionally cadging my raisins. Or he sits still and regards me thoughtfully from his pale, fur-curtained eyes. Chantek calls himself an orangutan person. Presumably this term would refer to any orang who'd been enculturated and given language. Untaught orangutans, like his cage mate Cebu, he's given the rather snide name of orange dog. He sees himself somehow as the ape in the web photo, stiff, solemn, buttoned up as a character in Planet of the Apes. His title sounds exalted as well as lonely. The only one of his kind in the universe, as far as he knows. I would like to visit Chantek's memory. It seems very likely he's begun to store material as language. Not just a simple object like a ball, surely a dog can do that much, but past events which I imagine he stores as simple sentences. Mother Lynn hurt finger, writer visit with Mother Lynn. Perhaps he sees them again, relives them, the way humans have become so adept at carrying and replaying hurt and shame. We have inner critics, depressive realism where we narrate our lives to ourselves with deadly precision. Chantek's not such a good presentist anymore. We've given him the quality of useless repetition, as we've hammered it into ourselves, so that even humans who've devoted their lives to voiding the existence of the past and future live in them regardless. You need to cut out the negative self-talk, a therapist scolds me. You need to let go of the past. My child development books tell me children put down virtually no memory until they have language. That spark in Chantek's mind, that language skill on the genome, we stand in front of it with our bellows. Words may mean nothing to Chantek ultimately, or they may mean negative self-talk and depressive realism. I'm a fat ape among apes, or a flood of dialogue like mine, of non-existent existence. I met Chantek in the spring and then flew back with my family to Bellingham, Washington, where I live. I think of him every day, swaddled as a newborn in his folds of flesh, in the ginger coat we, his relatives, have thrown off. He is magnificent. His magnificence is in front of me and the numbers. 15 to 20,000 left in the wild, and maybe 10 years to go at our current rate of extinction. The difficulty of changing that. All this I remember. Right now, within the bonds of the present, the neighbor's boy's reggae music blasts far too loud, and Mars' path has brought it closer to the Earth than it's been in 60,000 years, so that the red planet flames at night over Venus and the moon, usurping the North Star's glow. When it last appeared like this, Neanderthals looked up at it as I do now, at an eye in the sky like a saber-toothed cat's, gleaming. I've taken to being outside all the time, to doing nothing, a statue of myself. My son sleeps and my husband reads in a skirt of light. What could matter? Things disappear in days, they stay gone for epochs. But I like to look at the bald eagles here, the black squirrels, the pleats of the pink mallow and the fuchsia, crazy offerings to the gods of the present, and the momentary fruit flies whose lives and mine are precisely equal. I don't think I'm a total presentist yet. What existed, existed. I just see in language that which dissolves into nothing in seconds, even if someone tries to make it live. When we come together, ape and human, author and reader, we settle for demonstrating that we both know the grossest objects of the earth, ball and hurt and water. What we would want to name is fluid and intestinal, the melancholy in the eyes of a caged ape, or a man and a boy hand in hand at a zoo. We've given Chantek a way of knowing the past, the gift of the void, of remembering the dark-haired woman named Ryder who looked at him hungrily and the question his speaking mind must have framed. What could she possibly want? Coda, August 2024. Chantek died in 2017 at the age of 39, an advanced age for an orangutan. I never saw him again. He did not achieve legal personhood, nor did he sue McDonald's over his bad diet. Orangutans like him remain critically endangered. When this article came out in 2005, the journal that published it received an aggrieved letter. Why hadn't they found an expert to present the counter-argument to mine? I couldn't imagine what the writer meant. How do you counter an experience? But the concept of animal language, animal consciousness, inflamed linguists in animal research then. In some ways, that's changed. The 2024 New York Declaration on Animal Consciousness, presented at New York University, carried 40 signatures from researchers representing major institutions around the world. The Declaration says there is strong scientific support for conscious experience in birds and mammals, and a realistic possibility of consciousness for many other creatures, including reptiles, insects, and fish. Bees play games with balls, and wrastfish recognize themselves in mirrors. In another news story, an Indonesian orangutan, one like Chantek, was filmed using the juice of a medicinal liana plant to treat a wound on his face, which promptly healed. A particular gray parrot I read yesterday is smart as a toddler. I steward 2 cats who share my life. They are, I read, intelligent as a 2 or 3-year-old. But my cats know me in ways I cannot know myself. What illnesses I might have, my level of stress, how I sleep. Their awareness of the other lives in my house, furred, winged, 8-legged, is far richer than mine. They know intimately a universe of things I do not, and are as intelligent as themselves. Our human discourse on animal consciousness remains mired in the human. I fall into this trap writing about Chantek, and I hope fall out of it. He was in many areas of intelligence much smarter than we humans. We could not do what a Chantek did in his environment. We don't value the kinds of intelligence he had only because we don't have them and cannot live their value. To know the world musically or through odor or color or 1,000 other ways that don't come with this body, humans have no yardstick for such geniuses. I imagine such knowings are acts of translation, ways to think and to record, languages. I want to think they are kinder languages than our own. Animals like Chantek aren't as good as we are at being human. That's all we can say. We humans are toddlers, still trying to figure out whether what's not in the room with us exists, and allocating crumbs of concern to what seems most like ourselves. The New York Declaration concludes, when there is a realistic possibility of conscious experience in an animal, it is irresponsible to ignore that possibility in decisions affecting that animal. What would be responsible? How do we measure the world outside of our own measures? This is the challenge Chantek still holds.
If you want to support our project, you can share this episode, visit our digital magazine winblue.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our Patreon community where you can access exclusive content starting at $3 a month. Your support allows us to create and share content that reimagines a fair and healthy world for all life forms.